Today, I'm sitting down with Sarah, the founder of Joyflow, a mindful movement method helping women reconnect with their bodies. We explore how the more we try and control our bodies from the outside, the more disconnected we become from them. We talk about her journey through extreme dieting and bodybuilding and the somatic practices that finally brought her home to herself. We also dive into how moving your body is one of the most powerful ways to move your emotions and the simple practices that you can do today to move out of your mind and into your body. Let's get into it. Welcome to In Alignment. I'm Annie.
And I'm Marissa. You were meant to find this today, and we're so glad you're here.
Welcome to In Alignment, Sarah. I am so excited to chat with you today. This is going to be a really fun conversation, and we've been dying to have you on for a while. So this is an exciting one. I would love if we could start off with your story. Tell us a little bit about you and your work, but most importantly, what got you to the work that you're doing today.
I am the founder of Joyflow, which is a mindful movement method designed to help you reconnect with your body and feel free. And that practice is rooted in really my entire story and healing journey with my own body. And that eventually led me to understand these amazing ways that we can move our body and breathe and make sounds, and how that can lead to this just incredible feeling of freedom and embodiment and groundedness and all the things that, give us the ability to be present in our own lives. And so I've been in the wellness and fitness industry for a decade or so. And I said to somebody recently, I'm like, I've been in the wellness industry like from the womb as far as careers go, because it's the only industry I've ever been in. It's just a passion that's so near and dear to my heart, is my whole heart. And I got started in college, started my first business in college, which was called Fit University. And that was centered around healthy living in college. And it was a nationwide community of college students. And the mission of Fit University was fitness is not about what it looks like, it's about how it feels. And that sentiment has been the through line of my whole career, and Joyflow is just the embodiment practice of exactly that, of just releasing how this focus that we've been very much, conditioned to fixate on what we look like. And when we get beyond that and focus on how we feel, just this entire world opens up. And so I'll stop there and see where you want me to go.
Talk about your experience in your physical body and how that led you to Joyflow.
Totally. Okay. So if we go way, way back to the beginning, and I just mentioned Fit University, even, what led to that was my my entire teen life, starting really when I was 8 years old, was focused on how can I make my body smaller. I went on my first diet at 8 years old, and from 8 to 19 or so, I did every single diet that you could do, from Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and the Special K diet when that was a thing, and all these ways. And I was, on the yo-yo dieting train of lose a couple pounds, get off the diet, and then repeat all over again. Shame, guilt, etc. Everything to make my body smaller. And eventually that kind of came to a head. I reached my most obsessive ways of being in my body when I was 19, and I started bodybuilding. And I finally, through, extreme regimented diet and exercise, got quote unquote the body of my dreams, the body that I had always wanted. But my mental health was completely out the window. Everything in my life and all of my energy was revolved around what I was going to do, how I was going to eat, how I was going to exercise, so that way I could stick to the plan and get this goal body, which I eventually did. But then I reached that point and I realized how I was actually feeling, and that really opened up this doorway for me. And I started learning about moderation and, the sentiment that I could have a cookie on a Wednesday instead of on a cheat meal. And that was truly at the time like a mind-blowing thought for me. And so more and more, kind of one thing unravels and then it continues to. And really just started leaning more into these mindful practices, which were always in my life. My mom introduced me to yoga at a very early age. So I was in my first yoga class at 11, which is really a godsend because I think those like roots were just with me the whole time. And, or maybe the roots were there and then they were continuing to grow the whole time. And then started using some of the things that I knew, like meditation and affirmations. And slowly, that started to, you know, help me get out of this like deep, dark pit that I was in.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like the more focused we are on controlling our bodies, the more dissociated we are from ourselves. W- Was there a connection during that time when you're focused on bodybuilding? And I would assume that there's a regimented diet, there's
Oh,
regimented
yeah.
workouts. You're spending so much of your time and energy on the external, mapping, planning, controlling to-do list, scheduling workouts, scheduling meal prep. Do you feel like you lost connection from your physical body during that time?
Yeah, I don't think the connection was ever established, and to your point, everything was focused on the external and how I could control the conditions to make the external what I wanted it to. And I think the only time that I had a sense of how I was feeling was when I felt so awful because like the first thing that comes to mind is, when I would have these cheat meals, like once a week cheat meals on the other side of this extreme regimented plan, I would often eat so much that I would feel and ultimately I would have to make myself purge because I had ate so much. I wasn't eating to purge, but it was just I felt so sick after eating. And so I think the only time that I had any kind of conscious awareness of how I was feeling, it was just in those moments where I was like, "Oh god, I feel awful." And which now looking back on that, well, I'm like, oh, well, the one time you're noticing how you feel, you're noticing how you don't feel well. To me, that would be a big flag at this point in time. But, we got to go on the journey to get that awareness. And so, yeah, I just think at the time I was just so laser focused that there was no, y- yeah, there was not even the understanding that I could, be connecting or noticing like, oh, how do I feel? How do I feel in my body? I did also like I felt strong and I there was a feeling of like confidence that I was gaining when I was going to the gym and that did feel good. But it was pretty much just laser focus. That's not the point here. And I didn't even know that it could be the point.
What was the turning point? Because I also feel like it's a hard thing to bring your awareness to and to try something different.
Yeah.
How did you round the corner from, so obsessed with controlling your body to
Yeah.
moving into your body and giving yourself grace and love and moving into a healthier state? What did that transition look like?
Yeah. Well, I do think like I said, I specifically remember learning it was probably like a blog post or something that I read about moderation. And that, I think that like aha moment of like, oh, wow, I could, again, like I could have a cookie on a Wednesday. I think that was like, it was almost like the crack that started to let light come in. And then I remember having a moment I had because I had a coach that I was working with, and every single week I would send him photos and I'd send him my weight, and it was my check in. And he would tell me, all right, keep on with the plan or we're going to change something up. And he would also give me the okay or the not okay to have a cheat meal. And there was one weekend where I had sent him my usual check in and he hadn't gotten back to me. And it was, like getting closer to Saturday night when I would have my cheat meal and I hadn't heard back from him and like the anxiety of like checking my email over and over and over again. Has he answered me? Has he answered me? And he didn't. And so I just took that as okay, well, I'm going to have a cheat meal and then I'm just going to continue that cheat meal until the next day until I till I hear from him. And I remember, so that led to a big binge. And at just some point in the middle of that binge, I was like a box of Pop Tarts in, and I just paused for a second. And for whatever reason, I was just like, there has to be another way. And that was the bigger crack. And that's when at the time I remember looking into like, you know, resources that I could find to help me with this. And there really was not much. There was like eating disorder clinics, and like that was it. This was over 10 years ago, like Instagram and TikTok and the way that people share their stories and, you know, how they go through things was not at all as prominent as it is now. And so that's when I just kind of started calling on things that I knew, which was meditation. And I started doing one of the biggest things for me was mindful eating. So just like taking a few breaths before every meal and starting to become present with what I was eating, the flavors, the textures, things like that. And yeah, so it was just like a very, very slow journey towards, you know, this whole other way. All the while, I was also teaching. Well, then a couple years later, I started teaching group fitness. And then when I started teaching group fitness as I was running Fit University, I very much was vocal about my own journey as I was going through this the whole step of the way. So I think that became an outlet for me to channel that energy.
Well, I think often, like, the more control we have around food and the rigidity
Hmm.
around workouts, for me, I've struggled with this as well. Other areas of my life are also very tightly wound and often very far from who I truly am. Like
Mm,
food, the way that I'm eating is usually a metaphor and a deeper reflection for what else is going on in my life.
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think as we transition into mindful eating, often other categories of our life loosen, soften, become more aligned, more authentic. There becomes more rhythm within them because
Totally.
they're grounded in a deeper self trust and authenticity.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I resonate a lot with what you said of like the metaphor and something similarly. Like I came to this point when I realized, like, oh, my relationship with my body is kind of reflective of my relationship with just my life and how I live my life. And I've never really thought about this, but as I think about it now, I very much think that like as I started gaining more trust and freedom in my body, it was like almost as I was expanding into this space of like freedom. And I go like this because what it feels like freedom and trust in life and a sense of like play. And I very much think that that is a very strong connection that like when I started leaning into those ways, like this sense of play and truly joy is what started to really fill my life. And you know, again, at the time, I was just kind of like winging it. And like how do I like, get myself out of this? And to your point of like it's really hard to go from restriction to mindful eating. And I mean it's really hard to get out of any cycle, that's the whole thing of being stuck in a cycle. It's just like it's hard to get out. And so it's for me, it was just a ton of okay, how do I want to feel? And in the recognition of that intention of how I want to feel, I can start to shine a light on all the things that I'm doing that help me feel that way and don't help me feel that way and make me maybe feel the opposite. And so it starts with awareness. And then in that comes to what you mentioned before, like the forgiveness when you have too much food and you don't feel great, or you maybe are noticing that you're controlling, like just ton of forgiveness, whether that is in the form of like writing letters or affirmations or like mirror work and like looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I love you, I'm sorry. And like a lot of that self work that we hear people talk about, like that truly does work when you let yourself embrace it. It works for me anyway.
How did you want to feel? How did you not feel in that phase? And you mentioned moving into aligning in the ways that you wanted to feel. What did you want to feel?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I reflect back on this journey, there's definitely like different phases. And then within those phases, I wanted to feel differently. So, right, when I went from like 8 to 19, there was not even a thought of how I wanted to feel. It was just how I wanted to look. And, and I think underneath that, how did I want to feel was probably like confident and accepted and loved. A lot of this was like wrapped up into like, well, if I change my body, I'll get a boyfriend kind of thing. So I think a lot of that was underlying this sense of wanting to be loved and accepted and appreciated. And so that was probably like the first stage. Then 1922, I just started, I wanted to feel, I think I wanted to just like feel neutral at a certain point in time. Again, there wasn't really I just like wanted to like stop obsessing. So it wasn't even how do I want to feel? It was just like, what do I want to stop doing? Because the other thing that I didn't say is like within all this, I did compete in a bodybuilding show. And then on the other side of that, when I got down to like the teeniest, tiniest I had ever been, like stopped getting a period, all that, on the other side, my body image was just like out the window. That was a very conscious moment for me of like, I know consciously that I am teeny tiny, but what I am seeing is so dysmorphed. And so again, that was like, I just want to get out of it. And then eventually, and as I was teaching more fitness and again saying, like, let's focus on feeling confident and having fun and letting that be what fitness is. I started taking that into my own workouts of just like, well, how do I want to feel today? And it might be as simple as like, oh, I want to feel light and springy. So the way that I work out today is gonna be that. Or I want to feel really open and so I'm gonna do something more yoga based. And I think like, you know, it was a long and it is always an ever unfolding journey. Then it became I want to feel free. I want to feel grounded and so on.
I love that. And let's segue into Joyflow.
Yeah,
So
let's
now
do it.
you explain what Joyflow is, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah. Well, so Joyflow kind of came out of all of this because in the midst of these questions of how do I want to feel, that led me to experiment and play with more and more different forms of movement. Because I've also always said, even from Fit You days, like there's a million and one ways to be fit and experience fitness. It's all about finding what works for you. And so in that, I very much am always like any kind of movement, any kind of opportunity to move in a new way, let me try it. And so along the way, I started finding things like ecstatic dance and breath work and energy work. And those things really started hitting on, wow, this is actually like what I've always wanted to feel. I've never felt this good and great. And so I slowly started weaving those into even just my general like fitness classes I was teaching. And over time, the method started to form itself into what it is today, which is this experience that guides you to first ground through breath and then bring in some gentle movement and sound release to start practicing expressing your voice and taking up space and using sound and breath to move energy until eventually we start letting the body lead the way. And by gentle cueing of, all right, like how do your shoulders want to move, your elbows, your hips. So ultimately, until we're dancing totally freely and then we ground it back down like how a yoga class would end in a shavasana. And so Joyflow really takes all these different what I call somatic snacks, which are just these little bite-sized practices that can help you reduce stress, come back to joy, come back to yourself, a sense of groundedness, and they build on each other into this full practice that's joy filled and accessible and is just a total blast, I gotta say. It's my favorite way to move. And it really, every time I do it, I'm like, wow, it's crazy how much different I feel from start to finish.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. You talk about the body holding power and wisdom that the mind doesn't have access to. You kind of just mentioned that, like these somatic snacks, these ways
Hmm.
that release, that get you in touch, that help you just experience your body and yourself in different ways.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. It's funny, like, what does it mean to describe something that's beyond the mind? Now we'll try to describe it. It's very
Yeah.
hard. But we have all of these emotions and sensations, and ultimately everything in its purest form is energy. And over time we give to those feelings and thoughts. And, I have a distinct memory somewhere in the midst of this journey of coming to this sentiment of emotions as information and just starting to practice, okay, well, how do I feel? And let me just be with that and say, okay, like, I'm here with you and that's it. Not trying to change how I feel or anything, just kind of being with it. And so the body holding power and wisdom is our body is just, oh my goodness, I mean, filled with all of this guidance if only we just give ourselves a moment to listen and pause. But we are kind of hindered from doing that when we're focused on just what our body looks like, right? But also when we're just in the busyness of every single day and we don't give ourselves a moment to pause and breathe and come back to our own selves. And so joy flow and other movement practices, of course, if done in like an intentional way, give our give us the ability to recognize, okay, like, what am I showing up with right now? Like, what am I feeling? And then let me use my breath. Let me start to shift my state from our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, to parasympathetic, rest and digest. Let me start to move my body and move that energy. And it is just like truly remarkable when you give your body that trust to simply just be with what you're feeling and experiencing rather than needing to like say, "Oh, I'm feeling this and this is what it means." And then we just get ourselves stuck in these cycles again.
Well, what's really interesting is I think also when we are embodied, we access our intuition. And
Mhm.
I think joy is also a way to feel embodied because if you're really experiencing joy and you're truly grateful, you're grounded in the present moment. When you're grounded in the present moment, you can connect with yourself through
Mhm.
movement, through an experience, through just totally being in the physical sense in the present moment in your body. And you are often given the nudges do this. This feels
Right.
good. This doesn't feel good.
Right.
And I often think when we're outside of ourselves, trying to control, either control our body into a smaller form or to follow these programs and plans perfectly, we are totally dissociated from ourselves. And it's interesting because often through control, we're trying to create certainty. We're trying to map ourselves to a future that we think we want, that feels safe, that feels predictable, that feels like it's in our highest good. But what's really happening is we're taking ourselves further down a path that is really not authentically aligned. And when we are present and we are embodied and we're practicing something like joy flow, or we're just letting our body express itself and being so grounded in the present moment, I think in that space, we're allowed to connect to our intuition, which then nudges us in these small incremental nudges towards alignment, the bigger picture of alignment. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because you've experienced both, and I have too. I lived a life of super control, super regimented. I need to map myself out of all of these health issues. I control myself into a smaller body, make sure I can secure the most foresight and safety for the rest of my life that I can through control and being, totally existing outside of myself. And then I've experienced in the past few years being totally embodied, having kind of no idea of what the future holds, surrendering, you know, the fact that nobody really knows, and moving into the physical sense, intuitive eating, intuitive movement, following joy, saying yes to the plans that feel right, no to the ones that don't. And it interestingly, although you give up the foresight and control that is a false sense of security, you're often very effortlessly guided to the things that are right for you. So I know that that is like a bigger picture way to talk about this practice, but I want to hear how that has been, an effect in your own life, potentially even being a female founder and starting Joyflow. But I just think that the body can guide us if we are able to surrender to the present moment and listen. How do you think that joy flow and the practice of being embodied in your physical body in the present moment, surrendering control, just the practice of surrendering and being
Yeah.
present, how has that personally guided you into a more authentic and aligned life?
Yeah, I mean it is the thing that has supported me in living an authentic in what feels authentic to me. And it kind of feels similar to what we were talking about before of like how do you move from this place of restriction to not. It is a truly a practice, like over and over and over again. And I think that's where the release of the certainty feels scary because, like, it is a non linear path. But when it, when you are in it, to be present with yourself and understand that you have the tools to be fully with the uncomfortability. You have the tool expand into states of joy and pleasure. And I mean, for me, I mean, I guess I've kind of always lived a non-linear path. And, the practice, I've had friends say to me, like, even in something as simple as like apartment searching, excuse me, as I take a sip of water. Like, I can remember a lease was coming towards the end, and it was, like, at a point where it's like, "Okay, where are you gonna live now?" And it just, like, we didn't know, but I just had, like, full trust that it would work out, and I have full trust because I just have, like, repeated evidence that, like, it always, always works out, and the practice of joy flow is a practice in that trust because it's not like you are showing up to a class and I'm saying, all right, y'all, we're going to start off. We're going to do a 5-minute warm up. We're then going to go into 10 push ups, 10 jumping jacks, 10 bicep curls for a little circuit. It's not that. It is, okay, we're going to show up in this space and we're going to, in this container. And I'm going to ask you maybe how do you want to feel at the end of this? And then we're going to go on this journey where there'll be, you know, touch points and there'll be guidance along the way, but ultimately it is you and your body that is leading you. And how much can you allow yourself to just follow how your body wants to move, follow those subtle nudges, right? You hear a song, how does your body want to start moving instinctively, and what's your reaction to control or let that happen? And I think, yeah, and that, to me, right, like the more you practice that, the more you practice that out in the world, right? Just like in yoga where they say you practice on the mat and off the mat. With joy flow, same thing. We don't really use mats, but like you practice in the joy flow space and then out in the world of how much can you just let yourself follow those nudges. And it is a freaking practice. And some days it will feel really easy and some days it'll feel really hard. And then can you meet yourself with self-compassion, rinse, lather, repeat all day, every day?
Give me an example of how to practice the method of joy flow in real life,
Like quite literally or more metaphorically? But
like metaphorically, of being able to be embodied and move with your intuition and not.
Mm,
I think you also say something that movement gives us access to information that thinking and talking doesn't.
yeah.
So I'm kind of asking that question of what is an example of in real life?
Mm,
Can we embody the method of joy flow to help us move through a situation or make a decision?
sure. Here's like a really simple situation. You are on the street or you're in a restaurant and you see someone that, do I know them? Or I want to say something to them, and you're feeling that there. And but what's the response? Is the response to suppress that, or is the response to follow that and allow yourself to do it? And so that's like a really, really simple example of that is like, what is that inner nudge telling you? And how are you responding to that nudge? And then, like, to kind of ground it and, okay, like, well, what can I do to like help myself kind of lean into that lunge urge? Something as simple as like a breath, like these, one of these somatic snacks that I call them is something as simple as a shoulder shrug, which is taking your shoulders all the way up towards your ears and then exhale, just let it go. Right? Like something as simple as that can be the gateway to just allow yourself to really tune in this moment. And instead of living from up here to come back to here.
For somebody who does not, is not as familiar with the feeling of being embodied and really
Yeah.
in touch with the physical body and the information that it can provide for us, how do we recognize the difference between a thought, an analytical,
Mm.
fear-based thought, or mind trying to intellectualize or override a feeling versus a gut intuition feeling?
This question is a great question. And I think it's a question that can never like be fully answered if I'm being totally transparent. Like, and I think something important to remember is that like our body doesn't communicate in language, right? Like our body is not going to say, okay, yes, now it is time to like pick up your glasses or something. Maybe you feel a nudge, but you know what I mean? It's not communicating in the same way that we hear our thoughts. And so for me, a way that I try to distinguish between this is right. Okay. So how do I notice or how do I recognize, is this a fear-based thought or is this a gut-based reaction is the question. And I'll also bring in, right, because we've been saying the word like embodied a lot. So, like, okay, what does it mean to be embodied? To me, it is to have a conscious awareness of your physical experience in the moment. How much are you noticing what's happening in your body in the moment? And with that is like, what are the sensations I'm feeling in my body? Not even the emotions. What are the physical sensations? If I were to describe them, are they hot? Are they cold? Do they feel fast moving? Do they feel slow? So for me, if there is this question of like, is this a fear based thought or is this a gut reaction? I start to notice, okay, well, what am I feeling and where am I feeling it? And I start to just kind of pinpoint. And I think the thing with all of this is that there is never going to be like 100% certainty, right? Because we are still a human trying to make sense of what we are experiencing. And so, but in the recognition or in the questioning of like, okay, I'm noticing I'm having this thought. What am I feeling? What are the sensations and where am I feeling it? And for me, oftentimes, like I can kind of locate or sense if I'm having a thought that like kind of feels like it's up here and like very fast moving, that tends to be more of like a fear-based, anxiety-based thought. Versus if it feels like a little bit lower and slower and more grounded, to me, I'm like, okay, that that is likely to be more of like a true gut feeling. But again, I think coming back to the sentiment of like emotions as information and like allowing yourself to kind of live in uncertainty and live in nuance, it's kind of just like this dance of recognition and feeling and noticing and pausing. And then it's like in that pause and in that breath that you could then choose, okay, like how do I move forward from here?
Also think sometimes we don't wanna hear intuition. I often think that my gut intuition, my true higher self answer is the quick, immediate response.
Mm,
My mind will go in and intellectualize and be like, "But maybe you shouldn't think about it like this," or, "Well, what if,"
mhm.
or, "It might be safer to think this," or, "No, it would be easier if it were this way." Like, sometimes our gut will tell us things that we don't wanna hear, and the mind can quickly go in and justify our way out of it, and
Yeah.
it takes courage to live and trust yourself to end the relationship that isn't serving you.
Mm,
Say no to the plan that you just don't wanna go to for whatever gut reason, even though
yeah.
you should. Like, it is harder to live a life followed like, kind of blindly following. I always feel like following your intuition is like you're walking the future with a blindfold.
Mm,
You can't see what's in front of you, and the mind does a really good job when you live in shoulds of mapping out the shoulds. Well, if I do
right.
all these things, I will get to this result, and we think that
Yes.
then we will feel safer, more in control, there's more certainty.
Right.
But oftentimes living following the decision and in the decisions that come out of our intuition are a little bit scarier, but they often lead us to a lot better places.
Totally. Well, I venture to say nearly always. I think of this sentiment that, of like things working out so much better than you can ever have imagined. And it's all it's all trust, and it's trusting yourself that you can experience those hard moments, because yeah, a lot of times like the things we got to do are not like the fun and joyful things that feel that way in the moment, but like we know we got to do them. And if you're not doing them, that's, I mean, I think only, or you are making a choice one way or another in your life. And we can have these tools that, and we can have the self-trust to know that we can move through those moments in order to get to where we truly want to be.
What is an example of our body communicating with us? You gave us one of, like, seeing somebody and wanting to talk to them, but what is another example of maybe something that comes through to you when you're practicing joy flow or in a class, but a quick way to get embodied and access the communication that our body is trying to what our body is trying to speak to us rather than our mind?
Yeah. One of the parts of joy flow, because we move through, we go through, we do this nice big shake, right? And so that's moving your energy. It's a great way to like reset your nervous system. It's literally what animals do, like to reset their nervous systems. So we go into this shake, we then go into this big expressive moment, just like let yourself dance freely. And then we come to stillness, and it's this moment to like feel and pause and just breathe in your body in the moment. And then we bring our hands to our heart and we say, body, what do you need? Body, what do you need? And again, the body is not often communicating with us in the way that we are anticipating communication. And I think that's really hard. And I think that that I think took me a long time. Like I almost wanted certainty in what my body was saying. Like I wanted this definitive answer. And it is, I think it's bringing this like sense of the need to know into this essence of intuitive understanding. And so in this question of body, what do I need? Body, what do you need? It's allowing yourself to be in that and feel what comes up, because maybe in that moment, what your body needs is to cry, or maybe what your body needs is to be squeezed a little tighter into a hug, or you need to move a little bit more or stretch. And the way I like to guide it is again coming back to like what are these sensations in the body, and what are these nudges, and if you could think of those nudges or those sensations as like little signposts along the highway, right? So if I'm here and I'm starting to notice sensation in my right shoulder, okay, let me just put my hand on my right shoulder. And with my hand on my right shoulder, okay, what do I feel from here? I actually kind of want to like pull my shoulder up to my ear and then roll it back. All right. And so it is this like moment by moment being so present with yourself and trusting that your own intuitive knowledge will come through however it does. Because I can't tell you how you're going to experience your own body's wisdom, right? We all experience it differently. And so it really just is this like, again, rinse, lather, repeat, like sensation, following that sensation, being present with your body. Body, what do you need? I feel like that is like my continuous go to practice to this day.
So I was going to wrap by asking you this question. For somebody who being embodied and moving into their physical self is very foreign, it's uncomfortable, they've never done this before. What is a practice? What is as you mentioned, a somatic snack? What is a quick question or a way that something that we can do every day to start building the relationship and connection to our physical self?
I think one of the simplest things we could do is something we already know how to do and like to do perhaps, which is like put on your favorite song and dance and just like let your body move right by yourself in your own home and but I think that the differentiator is rather than just like put on a song and then like go on with your day is put on the song, let yourself dance and then at the end of it come to stillness and place a hand on your heart and just breathe and be with yourself and just notice what's there. And that's it.
I love
It's
that.
like it is as simple as that and it will like radically transform your life.
Really interesting too, because I think you mentioned just notice what's there. Marissa and I talk about this a lot at Shift of the feelings that we often feel. It's like, oh, I'm in such a bad mood today. I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. There's always a feeling underneath that.
Oh yeah.
You have to sit with yourself and slow down to feel what is at the root. And we only really shift the feeling if we understand what the root of it is. Like
100%.
and fear. It's often
Mhm.
different than what we think it is.
Totally. Or like often like anger, often like for me at the bottom of that is like sadness, like it's you have to let yourself go through the layers.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
And then energetically move that. Like emotions are energy in motion.
Mhm.
And that's
Exactly.
of the practice of joy flow and the somatic
Mhm.
snacks is that you can then like detox, cleanse, move that energy through you.
100%. Yeah. I mean, at the start of every Joyflow class, there's this question and invitation of like, what are you showing up with? How are you feeling? And then oftentimes, right, there's this, okay, how do you want to feel? That's not always asked, but oftentimes. And then we go through this practice. And through that, you give you whatever you're feeling presence and like care. And you're just saying, like, hey, I'm here with you. You're not trying to change it. But then you breathe, you move, you start to move that energy. And you, in a sense, the way I like to think about it is like you're then clearing that channel for then joy and wisdom and anything else to flow through. But unless you're giving yourself space for, kind of the mucky stuff to move, nothing else can come through.
Yeah, and it's okay. Sometimes we feel uncomfortable feelings and we just want to avoid them. And that's
Right.
we're emotional eating or controlling or
Yeah,
not eating or scrolling or drinking, whatever it may be. But to actually get to the other side, we have to sit and process the discomfort.
totally. And the process can be as simple as moving. It doesn't always have to be like, let me like think about this and
Yes,
journal on it. Like those have their time and place, of course, but you know, everything, it can be as simple as moving.
100%.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Where can everyone find you in Joyflow?
Yep, you can find me on Instagram. It's just my name, Sarah J Gaines. So I'm currently trying to change my username since I just got married. So, but if you type in Sarah Joy and Joyflow, you'll find me some way. Joyflow also on Instagram at Joyflow NYC. And I also want to share that we have a free mini masterclass that walks you through those 5 somatic snacks of Joyflow. The entire thing is about an hour, but it's broken up into small videos. So that is totally free. You can find it on the Joyflow website in the Academy link. So definitely, you know, use that as a resource.
Amazing. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Sarah. And we will link every
Thank you, Annie.
notes as well.
Amazing.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
If something in today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment to pause and notice where it's sitting within you.
Living in alignment is not about fixing yourself or becoming someone new. It's about listening, trusting, and slowly coming home to who you already are.
Thank you for spending this time with us and for being part of this community.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might resonate with it too. See you next time.